Let me start with a question that rarely gets asked out loud. What happens when you cross into your 80 and the world around you quietly changes, not in grand gestures, but in fading echoes? They don't tell you that the real aging begins not in your bones, but in the spaces people used to fill, not with wrinkles or slower steps, but with quieter rooms and longer silences. This isn't about the celebratory birthdays or jokes about being young at heart. It's about the sobering moment when you realize your phone hasn't rung in days, not because people don't care, but because life keeps moving even if yours is slowing. Reality TV, your social circle begins to disappear, quietly. You might not notice it at first. You're still getting birthday calls, the occasional drop in from the grandkids, but slowly the rhythm you once danced to with friends, neighbors, siblings, it falters. It's not always death. Sometimes it's dementia. Sometimes it's distance. Sometimes it's just fading. I remember visiting my great aunt Ruth one afternoon. She was sitting in her favorite armchair, the one with threadbare cushions and the dent shaped perfectly to her back. She looked up from her tea and said, "Is it strange that I miss people who aren't even gone yet?" That line stayed with me because it captures something very specific about life after 80. The grief is not always in funerals. Sometimes it's in the silence between text messages that never come, or in watching the mailbox stay empty. One of the men I met while volunteering at a senior center, George, had a tradition: Thursday night poker with 3 lifelong friends. For over 20 years, it was a ritual: chips, laughter, old jazz on the radio. But one got sick, one moved, one passed. Now George still plays every Thursday, but it's solitaire, alone at the same table. The truth is, loneliness after 80 isn't loud. It doesn't always cry. Sometimes it just sits there like a shadow in your living room. But here's the thing most people miss. When you know it's coming, you can prepare for it. You don't have to surrender to the silence. You can seek out new rhythms. Slower, yes, but still real. A neighbor you've never spoken to before can become your lunch buddy. A local class, pottery, painting, or chair yoga becomes more than a hobby. It becomes a lifeline. You might even surprise yourself by finding real connection in unexpected places: online support groups, church meetups, or writing letters to people who forgot the beauty of snail mail. Because the biggest lie about growing old is that connection stops. The truth is, connection changes form, and you have to be bold enough to change with it. Personal reflection. My grandfather, after losing his wife of 58 years, spent 6 months eating in silence. One day, he walked into the local public library, not to read, but to talk. He asked the librarian if there were any senior discussion groups. 2 weeks later, he was reading poetry aloud to strangers who became friends. He always said it was that room, not any doctor, that saved him. So if you're in your 80 or approaching it, remember this: when the world grows quiet, you don't have to stay silent with it. Speak, invite, show up, even if you have to do it first. One of the clearest signs that you're truly entering your 80s isn't in the mirror, it's in the way your body begins to speak up and it no longer whispers. At younger stages in life, your body is like a loyal assistant, working hard behind the scenes, quietly fixing what you break, bouncing back from late nights, long flights, heavy lifting, and accidents that barely slow you down. But after 80, your body becomes the lead character. Every movement has weight. Every recovery takes longer. Every decision you make, even what to eat or how long to sit, has consequences that echo into the next day or week. I once met a woman named Jean, 82, who told me, "These days, I wake up and wait to see which body I get. Some days, I'm light on my feet. Other days, it's like my joints are protesting the whole idea of getting out of bed." This is the truth we rarely talk about. After 80, your relationship with your body changes from command to negotiation. You can no longer just do things. You have to ask your body if it's ready. And sometimes it says no. You might trip over a curb, not fall hard, just to stumble. But where that once would have been a shrug, now it becomes 2 weeks of lower back pain and a cautious gait that wasn't there before. Even a cold lingers like an uninvited guest. The bounce back isn't just slower, sometimes it doesn't fully arrive. The frustration? You didn't change how you live, your body just changed how it responds. I knew a retired landscaper, Marcus, 84, still strong, still proud, still mowing his own lawn. One summer, he slipped trimming hedges. Not a major injury, a small twist in the ankle, but that minor twist stole 3 months of independence. He stopped walking the neighborhood, stopped gardening, not because he couldn't, but because the fear of another fall quietly crept in. And that's the hidden cost. Not the injury, but the aftershock of losing confidence in your own body. It's not just physical, it's emotional. You start second guessing yourself. Can I carry that? Should I drive today? What if I push too hard and don't recover? It becomes easier to say no to plans, to cancel outings, to skip the walk, not from laziness, but from caution. And that caution, while wise, can slowly become a cage. But here's what people often miss. Slowing down is not the same as giving up. After 80, taking your time is not a weakness, it's a form of mastery. It's knowing when to rest, when to say yes, when to move, when to stop. It's turning health into a ritual, not a guarantee. Jean, the woman I mentioned earlier, eventually stopped fighting her body's changes and started walking 15 minutes every morning, even if her knees disagreed. She told me, I don't walk to get strong again, I walk to remind myself that I'm still here. That's a powerful shift. You stop chasing your younger body and start honoring the one that's carried you this far. The bounce may be gone, but awareness, that grows. You become more deliberate, more present. You stretch with intention. You hydrate like it matters, because it does. You'll listen when your joints ache instead of ignoring them. This is what resilience looks like at 80. It's not sprinting ahead. It's moving with grace. Showing up for your body every single day, even when it doesn't show up the way it used to. One of the hardest things about aging isn't the aches or the wrinkles, it's the moment you realize you can't quite do everything by yourself anymore. It doesn't hit you like a crash, it creeps in like fog. At 80, you're not necessarily fragile. In fact, you may still feel sharp, alert, capable. But something changes. You find yourself hesitating before climbing the stairs. You ask yourself twice before lifting that heavy pot. You grip the handrail tighter, not because you're scared, but because you're starting to listen to your instincts more than your pride. This is where a subtle truth sets in. Needing help is not a defeat, it's a transition. But the transition is rarely easy, especially for people who've spent decades being the one others relied on. I once sat with a woman named Carol, 83, who had raised 5 children, managed her household, volunteered, and never missed a Sunday at church. One afternoon, she confessed with tears in her eyes. Asking my daughter to drive me to the store felt more humiliating than the time I got fired at 22. Why? Because somewhere deep down, we equate independence with identity. And when that independence begins to slip, we fear that our value is slipping with it. But here's the beautiful paradox. Real strength at 80 isn't about doing it all, it's about knowing when to ask. Let me tell you about Mr. Allen, 85 years old and stubborn as an oak, a former mechanic fiercely self-reliant. His son installed a grab bar in the shower. Mr. Allen removed it the next day. I'm not an invalid, he grumbled. A week later, he slipped, no serious injury, just a bruised hip and a wounded ego. He finally agreed to keep the bar, but what changed wasn't just the bar, it was his mindset. He began to see help not as intrusion, but as insurance. Not as a loss of dignity, but a way to preserve it longer. And that's the lesson we all eventually face. Independence doesn't mean isolation. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean silence. Asking for help can look like letting someone carry your groceries, accepting a neighbor's offer to mow your lawn, telling your son you don't feel safe driving at night anymore. These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that you value your time and safety enough to protect them. You don't need to fight aging, you need to partner with it. And sometimes help doesn't come from people. It comes from smart systems, motion lights, pill reminders, automatic bill pay, voice assistants, tools that extend your freedom instead of replacing it. Carol eventually got a voice-controlled smart speaker. She now plays her favorite old jazz every morning without moving from her recliner. Technology, she laughed, is my new butler. If you're over 80, maybe no one's said this to you clearly. It's okay to lean, it's okay to ask, it's okay to receive. You are not a burden, you are still a builder, just in a new way. Because the goal isn't just to keep going, it's to go wiser, not harder. There comes a point in aging, often around 80, when you begin to notice something far more unsettling than creaky knees or slower days. You begin to feel invisible. Not to your family, necessarily, not even to close friends, but to the world. The strangers, the clerks, the service desks, the systems built for speed and youth. It's not always intentional, but that doesn't make it hurt less. It starts subtly. The cashier talks to the person behind you before they finish ringing up your groceries. The doctor turns to your adult child and asks, "How is she feeling?" as if you're not in the room. The young waiter at the cafe slows his words as if you've forgotten how to understand them. At first, you brush it off. You're strong. You're proud. You've lived long enough to laugh about it. But over time, it adds up and it sinks deep. I once met a woman named Mabel, 86. She had been a teacher, a city council member, and a grandmother of 9. She told me, the first time someone called me sweetie in that tone, I didn't even realize it was condescending. I just smiled. But now I hear it everywhere, and I wonder when my name stopped being enough. It's not about ego, it's about existence. Because when the world stops acknowledging you, you start questioning whether you still count. And here's the brutal irony. You've never had more stories, more insight, more hard-earned perspective, but suddenly it feels like no one is asking to hear them anymore. Society runs fast, and too often it forgets that wisdom doesn't shout. It sits quietly, it waits to be invited in. This is what we're up against. A culture that worships speed and skin-deep youth while dismissing the soul-deep beauty of a life lived fully. And if you're not careful, you start to retreat, not because you've lost your voice, but because others stopped listening. But let me say this clearly. You are not a shadow, you are not background, you are still a force. I remember Irene, who volunteered weekly at a local museum. She had lived through the era the exhibit was about. A visitor came in, asked a question about the 1960X, and the young staff member answered without even turning to Irene. She knew the answer better than anyone, but she stood in silence. Later, she told me, "I've stopped offering. People assume I'm just there to fill the space." That broke my heart, because if we don't reclaim our space, if we don't speak up, the world will keep forgetting we're here. So what can we do? Speak even when no one asks. Share, even if they don't listen the first time. Vote, volunteer, create, laugh loudly. Wear red lipstick, ask questions, take up the room you're in. You don't have to demand attention, just refuse to disappear. Because presence isn't just physical, it's spiritual, it's emotional. And when you choose to stand in your presence at 80, at 90, at any age, you challenge the world to take notice again. You remind them and yourself that you are still writing your story. Not a footnote, not a postscript. A living, breathing chapter full of meaning. There's a stillness that often settles in after 80. Not just in your schedule, but in your soul. The days are slower, the phone rings less, there are fewer errands, fewer obligations, fewer deadlines. And with all that open space comes something many people don't expect. Reflection that doesn't always feel peaceful. You find yourself looking back more than looking forward. You revisit moments you thought were behind you. I should have spent more time with my father. Why didn't I take that job? Why did I wait so long to forgive her? Regret doesn't always come crashing in. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as a sigh, a pause, a stare out the window. And it can feel heavier at 80, not because the mistakes were worse, but because the time to fix them feels shorter. But here's a truth you may need to hear today. Purpose doesn't retire just because you did. Let me tell you about Stanley. He was 88 when I met him, a retired high school teacher, widower, and avid crossword puzzler. He'd spent 40 years shaping young minds, showing up early, staying late, mentoring students who didn't believe in themselves. Then one day, it was over. At first, retirement was a relief, then a vacation, then a void. He told me, "No one needs me anymore. I'm not useful." But he was wrong. One afternoon, he helped a teenager in his apartment building with her college essay, just once. But she came back the next week and the next. Before long, he was the unofficial writing coach for half the building. Stanley didn't get his job back. He got something better, a reason to wake up again. Because here's the lesson he learned, and that all of us need to remember. Purpose isn't about productivity, it's about presence. You may no longer manage a business or raise a family, but you can be the wisdom someone needs during a crisis. Be the one who calls first, checks in, listens without judgment. Be the neighbor who waves every morning and makes the street feel less lonely. Even small acts, a handwritten note, a kind comment, a story shared with a grandchild, can become legacies. And when regret comes knocking, you don't have to let it take the wheel. You greet it, you acknowledge it, then you redirect it into something meaningful. Because the only thing more powerful than what you didn't do is what you still can do. Some people wait until it's too late to say, "I'm proud of you," or "I'm sorry," or "I love you," but not you. At 80, you still have the ability and the right to give closure, offer blessings, plant seeds you may never see grow. And that's not sadness. That's a kind of redemption that belongs only to the wise. So if you've asked yourself, what now? The answer is simple, even if not easy. Now you become the elder who brings light to others. Now you share stories that change the way someone younger sees the world. Now, you forgive yourself for what didn't happen and take pride in what did. Because you're not finished. You're just in a chapter that carries more weight per word than any that came before. Reaching your ADS is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a deeper, quieter, and more powerful season of life. Yes, the world may move faster. Yes, your body may not always keep pace. And yes, there may be moments when silence feels louder than it used to. But none of that takes away your voice. None of that erases your value. None of that means your purpose has expired. You've lived, you've endured, you've loved. And now more than ever, the world needs what only you can give. Your stories, your wisdom, your patience, your presence. So what will you do with this chapter? Maybe you'll reach out to someone you've lost touch with. Maybe you'll take that short walk you've been avoiding. Maybe you'll finally tell your story, even if it's just to one person who needs to hear it. Whatever you choose, let it come from a place of quiet strength. Because at 80, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You just have to keep showing up fully, honestly, and unapologetically. If this video spoke to you, if even one of these truths felt real, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know which of these 5 realities resonated most, and what will you do with that awareness? And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel, Real Senior Life. This is a space created for you, where your experience matters, your challenges are honored, and your voice is always welcome. Tap the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video that helps you navigate aging with dignity, courage, and community. Because you're not invisible here. You're the reason this channel exists. Thank you for watching. We're so glad you're here, and we can't wait to walk this journey with you.